Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week is going to be the turn of the Iceman. Yes, the famous Iceman. That is Anthony Irvine, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry, all that other groovy stuff. Anyway, this is the interview, and after quite a long chat to begin with, which gets edited out, but it's probably the best bit of the whole conversation. But anyway, it's a bit rambly. We got down to that very exciting subject that was the early formative years. Just to fill you in a little bit about the Iceman, he started in the early 80s with his block of ice melting on stage. Also, he has a very good website because he's gone into other kind of creative endeavours, which is also painting. So if you go to his website, which is iceblocked.co.uk, just go for Anthony Irvine, Iceman. You will find it all there, just Google away. And also you've got this fantastic interview to hear more about his life. Anyway, Anthony, tell us all about your creative processes and the early years.
Well, without being facetious, early on, as a young child, I was very aware of fridges.
Yes.
And refrigeration. And also the whirring stop-start sound of old-fashioned freezers.
Yes, so there used to be interesting sort of public information films about the dangers of freezers and being locked in a freezer. As a small child, I remember watching these and being terrified because you suddenly say...
Funnily enough, it's interesting you mentioned that because I was actually locked in a freezer. I worked as a milkman at one phase for the Oxford and Swindon Co-op.
Right.
And I went into the freezer to put the milk that hadn't been sold, or maybe it was the other way around, to take the milk out in the morning. And one of my fellow workers, who happened to be called Spud, shut the door. He thought it was funny.
Yes.
So I experienced the first stages of frostbite.
Yes.
But he did let me out.
I bet they didn't even have one of those kind of risk assessment sort of accident books, did they?
No emergency button.
That was before political correctness went mad.
I think, yeah.
Yes. So
I also met a man at Hyde Park Corner. Sorry, these aren't very cultural influences.
No, that's good.
I was inspired by someone who spoke out of the blue at Hyde Park Corner. I think he was talking about aliens or something like that. But he just struck me. So it's like you sometimes have influences that you never actually know, and you don't get to know them, and you can't quite label them. I just became interested in performance art. I don't know quite how. I remember a guy brushing a lot in Serpentine Gallery. That struck me. So I've got quirky little influences, really.
So during the 60s, did you come across people like, I don't know, in this area, we had a guy called Bruce Lacey who used to...
Yes, I did come across him.
The Bruce Lacey.
I do remember him, yeah.
So he loved...
You won't remember me,
but he loved his performance art, and and during the 70s, he used to go to a lot of the East Anglian fairs like Barsham and Albion fairs, and it would often, the thing was you had to see Bruce naked as a sort of conversation piece for some reason. It was always about a fertility kind of ritual that he would have, and he mixed lots of kind of random, I suppose you call it cultural appropriation now, but we just thought, well, look, Bruce is naked again.
Of course, Yoko and Abramovich, is that how you say it? Are quite into nudity, aren't they?
Yes, that is really, yes.
I've never really done that myself.
No, I'm sort of quite modest myself. So so during the 60s then, did you have a kind of exciting time of like seeing the growth of that alternative culture happening, from people like Richard Hamilton's pop art to Andy Warhol to the happenings of the sort of that period to the 14-hour Technicolor Dream at the Ali Pali? Did things like that sort of kind of interest you?
I think I became more aware of them later, because in the 60s I was in an open prison in Hertfordshire. When I say that, it was an educational institution, but it felt like an open prison.
Okay, yes, because I was thinking, okay, that's
I think it's called a boarding school.
Right, so you had that kind of lifestyle.
So I had no influences at all, apart from suppression.
Yes. and fear, probably.
It did give me resilience, ice-like resilience.
I know, but it's
But I think I became more involved in performance in the 70s, really, and the
yes,
80s.
well,
So,
absolutely. And
so
what were
I
you?
think I was.
What was your family like? What were your parents like?
They were rather orthodox and gave me great security. In fact, I felt too secure, which is why I tried to create insecurity.
Yes, and obviously
I succeeded.
going to boarding school. Did they have dreams of some exciting pathway to I don't know, the civil
Prime
servant?
ministership.
Yeah, basically that was it. Really,
Yes, I think that was the idea.
they had dreams, didn't they? Really. Where and where were you growing up at this stage? Where was the family home?
Chelsea.
Right.
But it was a little bit bohemian in those days, not quite so commercial. Very
Yes.
nice.
I guess you
Although
would
I
have.
do remember the fashion parade down the King's Road.
Yeah.
Are you aware of that? There used to be a sort of regular Saturday fashion in the 60s, yes.
I guess you would have had some of the kind of interesting kind of political. Did you have Christine Keeler and the kind of Robert Fraser's sort of?
I didn't have her myself.
No, probably not. But were you aware of that kind of groovy scene like Robert Fraser, the great?
Yes, but I think I was still quite young in the 60s, so I don't think I was quite, and being a slow developer, I don't think I was really out there very much. So I can't really say I experienced the 60s,
No.
apart from as an observer
Yes, that's fair enough.
from the open prison.
From the open prison of your boarding school years. Did you go for rugby, cricket, or was it just like, Christ, let me just avoid all of it?
I boxed for my school.
Oh, that's quite useful.
Which explains a lot, I think.
Yes, yes.
I won 3 out of my 4 fights, apart from although I ran of my external fights, but I won quite a few internal fights.
Yes.
I have quite long reach.
I think Muhammad Ali had the same. Yes.
People at a distance.
Yeah. And did you ever see the film The Rumble in the Jungle with Muhammad Ali and was it Joe Fraser when they had that fight in Zaire, which was it was quite an amazing film.
The one that went on and on and on.
Well, it was a long fight, but they also got there, and then it had to be sort of postponed.
Oh yes, yeah.
They had to stay there for a lot longer than they expected, and
yes.
Then they had B.B. King and James Brown appearing to try and entertain the crowd while this kind of quite amazing sort of dictator, mad ruler sort of was killing lots of people. Whoever sort of
yes, and insisting the fight went ahead, although none of them really wanted to do it.
Yes, but.
Yeah,
the money was handy. So then did you leave school at 16 or 18 at this stage?
I left school at 18.
Right. And was it university or?
It was a transition period where I did a number of manual jobs. In fact, it was for a company called Manpower.
Ah, nice. Right.
You used to go to different sort of warehouses and do jobs. In fact, there's not many jobs I haven't done, really.
Yeah.
Try and name me one and see if I've done it. You'll probably catch me out first time.
Postie?
Yes, I have delivered some postal, and I feel very guilty in retrospect because there was a postal workers strike, and I was very naive and I didn't realise I was what's called black.
You were scab.
Blackballing. No.
Did you?
Anyway, I was betraying the postal union.
Yes, you just went for it.
I feel very guilty in retrospect.
Yes.
Is ignorance enough? I don't know.
I don't know. It's good enough. If you're in the high court, you can get away with most things, can't you? Then did you, as the 70s progressed, were you kind of a little bit kind of curious with any of the, I don't know, the music culture, the film, the sort of the theatre of the time, or were you just stuck in either a fridge or in the manual work of warehouse?
I was in a jazz rock band whose name I can't even remember, but I remember I was quite good on the saxophone if I did a solo, but I had no discipline. So I never knew when to come in and that sort of thing. So they sacked me, I'm afraid. I don't think I really was much of a musician.
Yeah, that must have sounded quite jazz, though, being quite random. I would have thought you'd have got away with
Yes,
it.
they blew a whistle for me, so I knew when to come in, and even that didn't work.
even,
So,
even,
so
even, even the
I
whistle.
played with the idea of being an actor,
Nice.
and then I found that very limiting, partly because of my own lack of talent. And
Yes.
that's when I got gradually drawn into more arty, performance art stuff, because I like the element of performance. I like the interaction with an
Yes.
audience. And so it was a sort of gradual process. And funnily enough, I'd done quite normal mainstream entertainment. Like I worked with a boxing kangaroo, a live one, in a Italian circus called Cercamora Fe. And I did a visual comedy act, which was big in East Germany before the wall came down. But
Right.
none of them quite satisfied. So to be honest, Ice came later as a reaction to all mainstream performance.
Yes. So when did you have
Actually, it wasn't reaction. It was more a case of sharing my own pain in public. So it sort of started as therapy, maybe. But then I gradually realized that it was communicating to people, and I realized it was becoming art. And
Yes.
that's when I felt rather pleased.
When did you have the kind of the light bulb moment with the ice?
I think it was about 84, 85, when I went and did my first block at a club called Crazy Larry's in Chelsea. And I remember Rory Bremner was on the bill, you know, the impersonator.
Yes.
And I came on and did my first block. I had a big kitchen sink. And at that stage, it was all visual. I just sort of desperately tried to get hold of the block and slithered and slid around. And I think people felt sorry for me, but were also quite amused. And that was the first sort of experience of a block.
Block. How did you first make your block of ice? Did you did you just put it in a bucket and then put it in a
Yes, I think the idea of a block came from when I was a young child. I remember being very unhappy at one point, and I thought if I build a little arch and crawl through it, I will become happy. So I built an arch of sort of block hard cushions, so sort of like blocks, but not ice.
yeah.
And I went through the arch, and I did feel very happy. So I think that gave me the idea of blocks can be blissful. And
Yes.
hence later on in life, the ice. I think the idea of ice was really appealed to me because it's such a rich symbol, a metaphor, if you like. You can go on forever saying what it represents. And
Yeah.
so I think I just like the idea of ice and blocks as a way of dealing with my personal situation.
Yeah. Did you I mean, on that kind of front of performing, was it a little bit like your, like David Bowie doing Ziggy Stardust, going from being Davy Jones, playing in sort of various kind of R&B bands to sort of becoming this character? Was it a little bit like that with your block of ice or going through your kind of mythical
Um,
arch?
I think with me, I think it was rather different from David Bowie. I think I got christened the Iceman straight away, and I stuck with the ice for the rest of my life and continue to do so, as you can see with this block.
Yes, this is.
And so I really am a one idea artist.
I know Stuart Lee sort of was talking about the kind, the history of comedy, and I think the musical period was that people could just, like he said, there was one particular comedian who just jumped a bit, just that was his act, just jumping. And I think in those days you could get, you could go a long way with just one rather interesting idea. I mean, just going back slightly to that sort of 1979. Early 80s, when there was that wave of like the comic strip and the young ones and sort of Alexis Sell and Rick Mayall. Did any of that sort of start to creep into your DNA? You know, those sort of a slightly. I mean,
Yes, I think I did a piece called Crane, where I had a ladder and a very heavy crane chain and a hook, and I lifted up a bag which had a toothbrush and toothpaste in it, and I cleaned my teeth. And so that was a sort of pre-run to the ice, really. But I remember Rick Mayall was on the bill. This was a comedy show, I think. Rick Mayall and people like that poet John Higley,
Oh yes,
Bailey, quite a few people, and of course Rick Mayall and co and Ben Elton became very sort of famous. So it was quite interesting, and I did try a few sort of verbal things, including poems and stuff, but it all seemed slightly lacking my own work, and I think it was all leading to that sort of sense of block.
yes. I mean, when just to sort of get a flavour, I mean, you have your time slot, you go on stage, you've got your block of ice. How did you develop the act, and how did you start to sort of interact with the audience?
The interactions with the audience took place in different ways. I mean, sometimes I took a quick photograph of the ice and did a fax copy on an old-fashioned fax machine, and I would go into the audience and try and sign it, by the way, and then I would go into the audience and try and sell it with differing degrees of success.
Yes.
But what I found interesting is because of its sort of upfront nature and the fact that the ice block is quite uncontrollable sometimes. I mean, I purposely had a very rickety structure, so the block would often end up amongst the audience or bits of it. So I did like the interactive element. So in a way, it was very messy, which made me quite unpopular with some fellow so-called comedians. But after a bit, I must confess, I realized that in order to get bookings, because I was trying to make a living in a sense from the blocks,
Yes.
I had to compromise a bit. So I decided to start verbalizing, and I told jokes, very, very bad jokes. And that was a way of trying to fill the slot, if you see what I mean, other than just a visual experience of the block of ice.
Yes.
But it was an excuse really to share the block. I mean, you know, people used to say you should go into an art gallery, and then the artist would say you should go into comedy. So I was never really very clear where I stood.
Yes. And how did your little the act sort of progress? What was the narrative? You're on stage, working this ice. Just how long do you kind of expect to be on stage, and how do you sort of go the end?
Well, I've sometimes done a sort of like 24-hour melt, but when I was in a comedy club or something like that, I would have it would build. So I would start with breath and I'd have a duck, a plastic duck, which you perhaps can see.
Oh yes, the duck.
It's from a hotel in Southampton. I did write to them and ask them if they wanted it back. So yes, I put the ice block on a structure, which often fell straight away. So people realised it was all about failure.
Yes.
And then basically somebody actually said it was rather well structured. It was basically, I started breath, you know, with audience participation, then friction, flame, money, and it would build, and then I'd sort of end up with a hammer and chisel, have a gun.
Oh, blimey, that's very exciting.
Again.
I think you're blowing your mic. Oh.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. That was slightly worried there, but thank God that was just that was like, yeah, God.
The neighbours are knocking on the door.
Yes, I know the guns. So health and safety. That
Oh,
was
sorry. Yeah, yes, there was no health and safety.
no. What did you used to have to do all this on a tarpaulin? By the way.
I did used to try and put a tarpaulin down, but it never actually collected the water.
No, I could imagine it just ran off onto the
And there was a lot
electrical
of
socket.
electrical equipment around, and I was spraying de-icer spray, so it's quite remarkable that I didn't kill anyone, really, at least of all myself.
Yeah, I know that was yes, it would be quite. I could imagine with wires under the stage. There could have been some quite interesting moments. A little.
I did end up with I don't know if you can see that explosive device.
Yes, I did.
Bar.
Oh my God.
And so the finale really was the explosion, which again was very dangerous, really. In retrospect, you know, in these little clubs. So I was quite irresponsible. But
And
I'm just taking a Polaroid. I'll send you a copy.
oh, well, oh my God, that is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. I never received a Polaroid in the post before.
Yeah.
I never
I'm
even
not
got.
sure I can give you the original.
No, because that could be worth too
But
much.
so I did document my work quite carefully. I mean,
Yes.
it's the whole concept, I suppose, of change, really, and time and etc. But for me, I suppose my main idea is the idea of the blocks live on, even though they're ephemeral and they're going to melt anyway. So I'm redundant.
Yes.
I like the idea of them living on in different formats, which is why I now paint them.
Yeah, because I know there was a particular Scottish artist who used to sort of make various structures and bits out of nature, which obviously in lots of leaves and lots of twigs. And there was obviously not going to be any record left, so he just photographed it, and people loved it. That was very 80s and early 90s, but I'll have to remember. Can't remember his name now. But then, as the decade progressed, oh yeah, just briefly. So was this like half an hour, or was it kind of like an hour on stage?
Well, it varied, but the regular spot was probably more like 20 minutes,
Right.
which was pretty chaotic, really. And I used to upstage the following comedians by clearing up, picking up props. So basically, I dominated the whole evening. Incidentally, there's the Polaroids from the past.
Oh wow.
I've got quite a few.
Do you actually catalogue them, as in what date you took the photographs?
I used to be meticulous.
Yes, because it would be quite confusing when you look back. And,
here's one, for example.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Hold it. Yep, got you.
Is that the right way up?
That is.
And it says it's block 241, 2nd of June, 1994.
Oh wow.
So I did a bit. I got a bit bored. At one stage, I was very meticulous, and I did document them. But then I thought this is too time-consuming, and now I just let them all merge, really.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. So as the decade progressed, how did you find you were going down kind of on the live circuit? Did the audience change much? Because I noticed with, you know, any sort of art work, and especially in the world of musicians, there's often another generation comes through, and that generation that possibly liked something have suddenly moved on a bit because, you know, age, responsibility, other commitments. Did you find as the decade progressed, anything kind of particularly changed with you and your sort of setup?
Yes, I think I became a bit of a dinosaur. I noticed it was more difficult to get bookings, and so yes, there's definitely changed, and there were a lot of rather slick comedians who were rather smart. So I think I mean, I was most active at a particular phase when it was more performance art. I mean, for example, there was a club in the East End run by Jock Muckfovich, or what he's called Open Heart Cabaret. And there was, you know, all sort of people like Ian Hinchcliffe, real slightly edgy performance artists, including myself, I think.
Yeah.
So I think clubs like that probably run into the ground.
Very quickly. Yeah, I guess so.
So I took a different direction at that point.
What
I
was
also
that?
had to earn some money for various reasons.
Well, yes, this is what happens when we all get to that moment where we're suddenly responsible for the bills and other
But I've
things.
never abandoned the blocks altogether. And as you know, I think I now paint blocks of ice with a human figure, which is sort of myself, quite prolifically. So
Yes.
the under the title of AIM, that's my painting name, AIM, and I'm actually selling a few, usually to people who feel sorry for me. I sold one the other day at Bridport of all places to Mark Thomas,
Oh,
you know,
yes,
political comedian,
political comedian.
political, and his partner, I think, kindly bought this painting, a mem series for him. So I tend to sell paintings to people I know. Would you like one? I don't know you yet, but
I
my
saw.
prices are quite modest.
Oh, yeah.
I'll send you a few attachments.
Oh,
No
good.
pressure.
No pressure.
Along
and
with the Polaroid.
and the Polaroid with yes, and I'll just give you my bank details. So then, I mean, so how did you then start to diversify as the sort of the 80s came to a close and we entered into the 90s? Was there was this the painting period, or did you have to get another side hustle for this?
I can't say I really diversified. I did something completely different, which I can't talk about because being a cult figure, it might reduce my mystery.
Oh, yeah, I know this would be terrible, isn't it? Yeah, no, you
Yes.
can't. So yes,
But I've never gone completely blockless. And a few years ago, oh yes, well, not so long ago, I did one for Stuart Lee. He did a thing called the Austerity Show, I think. Salute to the 80s. Did you hear about that?
no,
Royal Festival Hall.
no.
And I had a friend of mine took a lot of photos of that block. So that gave me a starting point for painting. Whereas now I paint more from imagination.
Yeah.
Incidentally, one of those blocks ended up in the River Thames.
God, it's kind of the circle of life, isn't it, really?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
I'm
you go.
hoping to meet them again sometime.
Well, yeah, but on a warmer day, I wouldn't do it in winter.
Yeah.
It'd be too much. So then, when did you sort of discover the canvas? Was this the kind of late 80s, or was this a little bit later on?
Much later,
Right.
about 2015, I think.
Oh wow, that was much later. My God,
Yep.
you really do jump. So during that next period, then was it sort of the kind of the performance art just
Sorry, which period? Next
the
period.
from the sort of the lost period? No, the 90s on to 2015. Was this a period where the ice and your performance just kind of rather went into hibernation, or did you just occasionally sneak out?
I think from about 2000 onwards, blocks became occasional.
Right. Did it feel
But
quite strange to find yourself back in the game? You know, when you went back into the freezer with your right, this is it. We're going to go back out on the road.
I think it felt very familiar. But I, to be honest, I rather like painting now because it's much more solitary. And I discover that it suits me better.
Right.
But I
Because
sell them interactively, so I still keep that idea of interaction. I mean, the only paintings I've sold are always, with people on a human level.
yeah. So
But
have
I'm
you
quite grateful to the blocks because I discover I'm a rather fine artist.
yes, absolutely.
They
And
call me art brute style, but I call it art block.
art block. Nice. That is amazing. And was there anybody during that period that you were looking at thinking, oh, That's an interesting sort of act they've got, like the famous record graveyard. Was that sort of something that you quite felt a sort of a bond with, or did you feel like, oh, that's just cheap and tacky, or did you feel like
What the record graveyard?
Yes, I mean with that period there was a little bit of that, a lot of experimentation, a lot of people
Yes,
having.
it's like someone used to destroy teddy bears. I found it slightly destructive, although I can't talk because in a sense I destroy the ice, but in a way I encourage the ice to have a new life, a new type of life.
Yeah.
I think I must have a lot of influences, but I rather think I've ploughed a solitary furrow.
Mm. Yeah, I was just
I
going
mean,
to.
I'll tell you, I mean, some artists strike me. Like there's a man called Roman Apalko, I think, who I don't think I would say influenced me, but I can't help admiring him. Apparently, every day he got up and painted numbers on the canvas meticulously.
Yes.
And by the time of his death, I can't remember, he reached a number like million or whatever. But I can't help being impressed, with that type of commitment from someone.
Yes, I was just going to
And
say.
I never had that myself, I don't think. You
We-
spot the Iceman.
I can spot the Iceman as well. This is very nice.
This one's called Earache.
Yes, wet ear.
Would you like that on your wall?
Well, it's tempting. I have to say, it's got a certain energy to it, which I think is interesting. It's a good one.
Thank you. I mean, I'm very grateful to my blocks because I see them really, without sounding pompous, as stepping stones to my career as a painter.
Yeah. And were you, I mean, just on that front of painting, when was the first time you sort of got the brush, the canvas, and started thinking, I might dabble into branching out and become a multifaceted artist?
Well, as I say, that came quite late in life and started in a very pedestrian manner. But it was just really a development of the photographs. I had quite a few photographs, and I thought, what's the next way the block can transmute, as it were?
Yes.
And I thought, painting, a more interesting interpretation, perhaps. And my early paintings make even me laugh because they are so naive that they're almost fascinating.
Yes.
So I went to the Jean de Buffet exhibition at the Barbican the other day, about a year ago, I think, sometime during lockdown, I think, and it amused me because I thought, these all look like my paintings.
And did you feel that did it give you a certain amount of confidence?
No, it made me think I'm out of date.
Oh.
No, actually, it did slightly, because I think the greatest thing about him is, well, I don't know really, but it's just the idea is that, art is for all.
Yes.
I'm not sure if that is his idea.
I guess
he got lots of people to do paintings, people in asylums and everywhere.
Yes. Would you refer to yourself as a kind of outsider artist then?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I prefer the word inside. I suppose, if I'm frank, I'm outside. I mean, the thing that I notice about my own paintings is, even though the motif is incredibly repetitive,
Mm-hmm.
I like to think within that there's an incredible range of styles.
Yes.
So I think I'm stuck with this for the rest of my life.
Because I remember
I've painted about 870 blocks. I've yet to overtake the actual number of blocks, probably.
No.
But I'm quite prolific, although I've wound down slightly. But I think I think quite carefully about it before I put brush to canvas. Recently, I've experimented with a hairdryer, actually, creating its dispersal effect.
Yeah. And I remember doing an interview with an artist a few years ago, and they were talking about how to finish a piece. And I think they had quite a spiritual kind of connection to it. So it almost had to resonate with them. How do you know when you've painted what moment to stop and think, that is it now, I've completed this, I need to now move on to the next project? Or yes, I just wondered what that process is or was.
Well, I paint quite quickly, and I'm usually quite pleased. I'm easily pleased, but occasionally I feel it's not quite right, and then that will be slightly more problematic. But I'll go on until I'm happy.
Yes.
But one steps back and looks at it, and I've never not exhibited one that I've done. So I've never been dissatisfied.
Oh,
Maybe I have a slight arrogance problem there.
Well, no, that's a great mantra for life. Let's face it.
Have you seen any of my paintings on my website?
I have. I've been looking at them, and because I could, yes, it's and there are quite a lot of different styles. They're not always about ice, are they? Or is the ice sometimes?
Well, you're right, but ice predominates. And I like the idea, especially with oils and so on, you can create quite a lot of melting effects.
Yes.
They're quite difficult to store.
I would imagine. I guess, were you ever influenced by people like the New York artist Basquiat?
No, but at first I went to his exhibition. When I say his exhibition, his post life exhibition. No, but I do. I rather like his sort of style.
Yeah,
one of mine came out a bit like his.
There's kind of moments where I think, oh yeah, that does remind me of one of his pieces, and I just wondered if you'd sort of become a little bit like, oh yes, I'm definitely onto some zeitgeist at this point in life.
Yes, I think I'm probably quite a reflective type of painter. I think he was probably a bit more muscular than me.
Yeah, I think he was also. I think there's a lot more drugs during that period in New York, wasn't there? There was an energy around that time.
Yes, it's rather sweet, his relationship with his friendship with Andy Warhol.
I know, it was very, very, very strange.
Of course, Andy Warhol was quite into Polaroids, wasn't he? So he was.
Yes, I know, he's got books on them.
He's probably influenced me without realizing it.
Yes, this is, and when you were doing, this, I suppose, say the 80s period of your performance, did you sort of find yourself? Did your parents come along to see your show? Did they sort of come and admire the evening's entertainment?
My mother came to one show, funny enough, at the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane.
No,
it was a charity show actually, fronted by Rowan Atkinson. No, Angus Dayton of all people.
right.
But Rowan Atkinson was on the bill. But I did my little act with the block of ice. I think it was to raise money for Pleasance Theatre, which was the London end of the Edinburgh Festival Theatre.
Yeah.
And at the end, first of all, I came on, the lights are so bright, I was personally blinded. But at the end of my act, I try and shoot the ice towards the end of my act, and I pretend that I've shot the duck. And then I drop a feather and say, what a downer.
Classic.
And so I think my line was, oh, fuck, I've killed the duck. And this shocked my mother. So she never came again.
Was there a stony silence the next day when you had to have a chat with her?
No, she was quite tolerant actually. But yes, I think that's the only occasion she saw a block of ice.
Yes, nice. And that's such a kind of a moment. Did you? I mean, as somebody reflect, as we reflect on our lives sometimes, is there some that you would have just wanted to tell your like 16, 18-year-old self starting out? Is there any little bit of like worldly wisdom that you would have just whispered and say, look, this is a good thing to do, perhaps, and focus on this?
I don't think I would advise my 18-year-old self to go in a different direction, funny enough. I think, the exploration is everything, really.
Yes.
That sounds good.
It does sound, it's very deep.
Exploration
is everything, actually. Do you feel the ice has kind of the block, has that sort of been the most stable and the most kind of important relationship you've had?
Yes, I think it's the one consistent, continuous skeleton I've had, really.
Yeah.
I mean, no, spine, perhaps.
Spine. Yeah, that's good. And just without giving away too many of your secrets, like a Penn and Teller kind of magician's act, what's the container that you use for the block of ice? Is there a particular, do you have different containers for different shows, or do you stick with?
Well, that's an interesting question. This particular block here is the container is a compost bucket, for the bin collection.
Oh, so it's a curvy block of ice we're looking at here.
Well, this is more oblong.
Oblong. Let's see the profile, the side profile. My God, don't drop it on your foot. Jesus. Yeah, you'll need to stand up. Look at that. Look at that. Oh my God. That is beautiful. And you must have a very big freezer.
Good what?
A big Oh no, I suppose you don't need to
I've got quite a good freezer.
A chest. Well, did you have one of those 1970s chest freezers, which people?
Yes, I did have a very good chest freezer at one stage. I thought of buying one of those ice cream vans, but I never quite got the finance together.
Yeah, I know. And then the KLF got there in front of you, didn't they, with their, I don't know, witty stuff.
I think, the famous tombstone analogy, he melted blocks of ice. There's something there that is unique.
Yes, there's no cliche there. That's the important things. And I think that's one thing you need to have in life.
I feel in the situation I found myself alive, it seems a certain purity to have done this over a period of years.
Yes, absolutely. Nice one. And how
it seems a sort of quite a sensible thing to do, really.
Very.
In a funny way.
And it just, and so kind of sustainable. As an artist, how did you find that kind of, lockdown period? How did that sort of how did you emotionally deal with that? Did that feel quite a tricky period, or were you able to navigate it?
Well, apart from having to wipe the shopping with my supervisor, I found it quite productive, actually, because it boosted my production of paintings to the extent that I had little else to do. I think I painted every day during that period.
Fantastic.
In a way, it was quite positive for me.
You racked up a lot of numbers. And then sort of looking ahead, have you got any sort of other sort of dates, plans, any other concepts coming up?
By the way, the duck is still not afloat.
No.
I think I would like to exhibit in some kind of gallery, really, rather than just online.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure how to organise that. Have you any suggestions?
I guess it's a bit of hustle, isn't it? I think your man, to be honest, if you've got his email address, I would just go and contact Stuart Lee and say, look, Stuart, you're a good chap. Have you got a space I could just, anybody that for a week who could lend me some space and you can sort of come and sort of, yes.
Yes, he was quite interested in buying two of my paintings, partly because they were of him. I did a show on his Resonance Radio, whatever it was.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah, and one of the paintings also was of him kindly carrying my props afterwards. He has no pride, you see.
Nice.
But he only answers occasionally to my emails, so I agree. He's a good possibility.
Yeah, you just need somebody who's got a sort of a contact and a space that can just say, look, we can in here. A gallery, and probably you could even have a display without the act of
There's a new gallery, funny enough, that's opened up in Bournemouth. Stuart Semple, I think it is called the Chant. It's called Chant. So maybe I'll try them.
Yeah, I think just do a bit of hustling, because there seems to be a bit of a wave of nostalgia that's creeping over us at the moment. I think a period of time, I'll put it down to 25 to 30 years, passes, and we sort of look back, not always with rose-tinted sunglasses, but sometimes just being a bit amazed with what happened at a period of time. And, looking at the 80s, and especially, I suppose, a lot of the independent music scene, I don't know, a lot of people have reevaluated it, and it sounds quite good, actually. And there's been a lot of books coming out. People have been writing their memoirs. There's been lots of photographic books. There's been films on various bands and albums that came out during that time. And Stuart Lee obviously did that one about Robert Lloyd and the Nightingales. So it's quite niche, but at the same time, there is an audience for it. And I think we quite enjoy looking at it and reflecting. So I think the time is right.
I think it could actually look quite impressive, if I say so myself, to see all my blocks, painted blocks, almost together, like in a small warehouse or somewhere. I might set it up myself, I don't know, but I think it might look quite interesting.
Yeah, I think Grayson Perry would love it. You should get in touch with Grayson and say, look.
Yes, of the art club, yes.
Because he would probably have seen your act and probably heard about your act, and he would probably be fascinated with it and would say, let's do a TV program about it. I think that would be key, actually.
That's a good idea. Yes.
I think that sort of thing, because people are always kind of interested how these things develop, and it is quite famous, your block of ice. This is it, and in a beautiful way, it's ephemeral, isn't it? And yet it's
transience.
It's just there, but it's not. But it's there again. We can't. Yeah. We can let go of it, knowing that as
absolutely long as No. I feel they're. I mean, they are technically somewhere. So might come across them again one day.
Yeah. And do you feel, as a person, what season, what part of the year is your favorite? Do you prefer spring, summer, winter, autumn? I just wondered which one resonates.
It's got to be winter, hasn't it? But when I was young, the winters were winter. There was snow. I mean, I'm old enough to have witnessed global temperature change. I mean, to experience it. So I think I rather like snow. I mean, that's inevitable, isn't it? But yeah, winter.
Yeah,
I was born in February.
Oh, I was born in March. Yeah. Tough periods, aren't they, really? Yeah, winters felt very long and they felt quite relentless. And yeah, your car always, I mean, when was the last time you bought any I was going to say, when was the last time you bought any de-icer? Because frankly, you don't really need it, but you probably do, don't you?
Yes, I used to have it as my headpiece. I used to have a de-icer spray on my head with a bandage. And then I'd spray the ice and say the Iceman is a de-icer spray, and of course, that was a time when the ozone hole was slightly high profile.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it was quite a comment on that, really.
I know. And you probably had a bit of guilt about that, didn't you?
Yes.
I'm sure you could weave in some sort of political or some
absolutely.
Environmental
I think I've got guilt about most things. That's the beauty of blocks.
That's the beauty of being...
You unblock.
You do. Did you, I mean, when you watched the film, The Snowman, did you feel a little bit tearful seeing this kind of relationship and then the melting? Did it resonate with you at all?
I'm not sure I've watched it. I mean, I know of it, but I'm not sure I've watched it. By the way, I can hear drips from my block.
Oh, fantastic. It is absolutely happening, isn't it?
Even though the duck is not floating, can you see the drips?
I can see the drips. It's definitely dripping. And also, I think it looks a little bit like the Leaning Tower piece. It seems to be particularly dripping on one side. Is there a sort of a heat source on one side of that table?
Yes, it's a sort of, it's a bit like a barbecue, that this structure. Yes, it's definitely at an angle, as you can see.
Yeah, it's very
It's much more solid than my previous performance structures, which had bamboo and stuff holding it up. So
right.
almost inevitably, the block would drop. And the question was when. Sometimes before I went on. I mean, every block has its own personality.
Yeah.
I once went to Malcolm Hardy's Tunnel Palladium at do you know at the end of Blackwall Tunnel? And the
No.
block had melted on the bus in the Blackwall Tunnel. It was a hot summer day. So when I turned my bucket over, liquid came out and no ice. So I said something
Basically.
like, I can go home now. And that was the only laugh I got before I got attacked.
Did you? I mean, because there was the Malcolm Hardy, there was it Raw Sex and Arthur Smith? Was that a scene that you were at all connected with at any stage?
Yes, Malcolm Hardy used to. I've been on a few shows with him. He was nominated as fellow tap water winner at Edinburgh Festival.
Right.
And in his autobiography, he claims he got the tap water award, when in fact it was me, the Iceman. But that's his style. But I used to find him amusing, but he was much more. I think he was he lived more than me, I think.
Yes, he was fast. He lived
Yeah,
a
but he got
fast.
me quite a few. He got me a booking on what's it called? That old pop program, The Tube. So I went up
Oh,
to Newcastle with a block.
you
Jules
were
Holland.
yes. And did you meet? There was Jules.
Morrissey was on the bill. I've been on the bill with Morrissey. Morrissey.
My God! So you were on the night, almost the last gig on the last period of the Smiths' career. I think that was probably 87, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
I know. I was just wondering because I think they've all been now put on YouTube actually. And what was the experience like? Because there was Paula Yates, there was Muriel Gray, Jules Holland. Did you get an interview as well?
Yes, I had a live interview, and I noticed Jules Holland picked up on the time thing. He said, "It's about time, isn't it?" I said, "Yes," amongst other things.
And how did you experience? And what was it like being? Because we used to watch it as like a religious program. But I mean, did it fulfill your dream? I mean, with the program, okay, with that, what's the practicalities with your ice? Because if you're coming from London, by the time you get to Newcastle, isn't there a risk that you just got a bucket of water?
Yes, it can be. I'm glad you asked about that because that's, in a way, people underestimate the practical
Yes, I know, because it's a bit underwhelming if you just come in as like not so much the Iceman as a man who's just walking around with a bucket of water.
I do like the idea of creating my own blocks, although I realise it's not just me; it's refrigeration. But I did quite often, especially with bigger shows, maybe get commercial ice people to deliver a block, which in a way became part of the event. In London, there was a very good company called Eskimo Ice who used to deliver blocks of ice that I could hardly lift up.
Right, my God! So you didn't always go for the same size. You would sometimes
different sizes.
different.
I did a TV show. Sounds quite mainstream. Noel Edmonds Christmas show, and I had about 24 blocks delivered. So I had a little mountain of ice before Chris Smith jumped out of his helicopter to interview me.
Nice.
Every event has been quite different in a way.
Yes. So
and also the attention I give the ice. I did one event where I literally just let it melt and did nothing else, and people came back and saw how it was getting on. But that wasn't a huge block. I think that was in Covent Garden or somewhere.
Yeah. Did you feel?
So normally I'm just a catalyst.
Yeah, I was just going to say when John Lennon met Yoko, and there was this sort of the famous story about the apple. Did you also kind of relate to some of that kind of 60s performance art?
Probably, without quite realizing it. I think I always got excited. I think I got excited by anything that was, a bit experimental.
Yes. So going back to the practicalities, you get your sort of call. You're going to be on the same show as the Smiths and various other people. Lots of showbiz, folk are going to be there, because by then the tube had got quite a following and obviously become very popular. So how did you then sort of deliver the ice? Did you take it with you from London, or did you have it delivered, flown in, especially from the Eskimo people?
Yes. I can't remember, to be honest, but I imagine that I don't. Oh, hello.
I'm here.
Oh, I imagine that perhaps the TV company provided the block in that case.
Right, there you go.
But I don't know for sure.
I'm gonna have to track this down now, actually, and watch the night and watch the show. Do you the next day? Do you sort of reflect and make notes about your the performances you did? Which bits worked and which bits didn't.
Yes, it never works in the sense of a successful event, really. But I do notice how different it happens. I mean, for example, at the Hackney Empire, are you with me?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. That was I went into the audience and the block moved around with me, really. At Comedy Store once, somebody kidnapped block. And I got a laugh from the same line. I can go home now. So it really is quite unexpected what happens, really. And that's part of the fun and interest and perhaps a slight element of danger. I mean, with a small d, So it's very unpredictable.
Yes. I mean, because you
but
did.
All I would say is when I arrive with a block, something happens that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Yes.
I think can I end up with that? I think that sums it up.
Yeah. Did you ever get sort of any hostile reactions or anger towards you and your block of ice?
I think I did. Oh, help.
What?
Oh, that's funny. My pen just came up for some reason. No, on the whole, people were quite kind, really. I think they were concerned for me. But occasionally it annoyed people.
Yeah.
But I've never been... I think I've never actually been hit during the performance.
Oh, thank God for that. That would be upsetting. Yes, no, I couldn't.
I think they realised I had a block to...
Yeah.
My missile was bigger than theirs.
So, because just on the sort of just trying to get a picture of this, when you said you went into the audience with the block, did you say it followed you, or were you holding it and walking around with it?
I would probably carry it into the audience and then donate it temporarily to somebody, and they would, because it's cold, would want to get rid of it quite quick. And so the one I'm thinking about is the Hackney Empire, which was I think, was that a tribute to Malcolm Hardy? I think that one. I think there's something on YouTube where I'm in the audience and it's traveling around, and in a way the ice becomes center stage, which is rather nice. So
nice.
I quite, although I'm sure I've got an ego problem like everybody else, I quite like delegating center stage to the block.
Yeah, well, I think the respect, it's a bit like any... I mean, do you look at it as a slightly sacred object at that moment?
Yes, I suppose I feel it's got significance because it's a unique event and a unique creation caused by me, caused by my activities, really.
Yeah.
So I suppose I like the fact, as I said, that something's happening wouldn't have happened otherwise without this entity.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess there's an energy, isn't there? There's a purpose, there's a consciousness. That's not...
And the fact that it was water and then it's going to return somehow makes that moment extra special, because it's like a bit like life. It's just that short duration that is active for a particular duration.
Yes. Yeah, because I mean, that's a slightly different. I mean, it's kind of interesting when one has a purposeness for it. Because I remember there's another artist who Richard Long. He would do these kind of artworks, which sometimes would just be him walking a line up and down all
Ah,
day.
yes, I have met him. Yes, walking up and down to create a line on the grass.
Yeah, and that was his kind of project for the day, and then he'd
Yes,
photograph it, and then that was it. And he, and
yes,
I've often found a lot of his Andy Goldsworthy was this other artist who was Scottish, I think, and he would again make pieces of work through leaves and probably I've mentioned, and then photograph them. They're very beautiful, but obviously they're going to be gone. They're just it's just nature. So
yes,
so in a way, you have a certain sort of a similar quality to those
yes. And
people.
even site-specific artifacts change, don't they? Because nature will change them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know with sort of Richard Long, he often works with a lot of natural materials that like mud,
Yeah,
clay, things like that, soil. It's all going to just eventually return back to the earth. So, like your ice, there is a sort of, even though I guess it is a comedy bit, there is also a significant sort of, a significant moment because with the climate change, there's more, like less
yes,
icebergs, everything's melting, and
yeah,
we're sort of
absolutely, yes. So
seasons.
although it's superficial performance art, it's actually very deep. In fact, I used to get audiences to chant the word "deep, deep." I used to, I used to make comments at the end of the ice, and they'd all go deep, deep.
Oh, nice. That's good.
Like it's not forever, deep, deep. So that used to amuse me because there was
Excellent.
an element of truth in what I was saying. But I
Yeah.
mean, of course, the history of the planet itself is ice ages and ice melts and so on.
Yeah, and I
So
know when I sort of occasionally go to one of my favourite places on the Norfolk coast, Holcombe, you sort of walk around the park and there's the ice house, and this is kind of a place that they would put blocks of ice and food to try and stay, I suppose, alive during the winter. And
yeah,
again, it was a very significant place. Obviously, the aristocracy had one. I don't think anyone else did, but it sort of it did serve.
yes, I've seen a few.
It is a sort of, it does serve that incredible important purpose if
Yeah,
we can survive those winters. But yeah, the ice age, and yeah, and
I
now we've got
remember in Lahore in Pakistan seeing old-fashioned Iceman deliver ice to the shops.
right.
That was rather touching.
Yes,
That was before my blocks.
that
Block
was
work.
it.
Yeah,
Oh, that little bit
that,
of
that was when I was on the hippie trail.
right. How long did your hippie, was this a hippie trail as in you were just hiking over to India to sort of find
Yes, it
spiritual
was. It
awakening?
was safe. It was safe to do it in those days.
Yes. So with that, was this the sort of 70s period of sort of long hair, beads?
Yes, a bit like that. But Mrs. Gandhi created a state of emergency in India at the time, so I remember that for some reason.
Yeah. Did you
I
resonate?
went to the Bamiyan Valley and went into the Buddha heads, which have now been blown up by the Taliban,
Oh God, that must have felt strange.
ironically creating more emptiness.
Yes. Yes. And loss. And sort of, yeah. Yes, the message of life. Yes. Don't hang on to things, they will get blown up.
Yes, touch the block work.
Yes. Did you sort of at that stage feel like, the hippie path was going to kind of give you the answers, or did you sort of just feel like, no, this is not quite for me?
Um, yes, I think it was a rather vague aim, really, quite pointless in retrospect.
That's the hippie world, isn't it, really? It promises so much and we love it, but it,
Yes,
it, it is a little bit sad.
yes, but I think it was all leading me to the block work.
Yeah, well, it's
I like to
interesting.
think that.
Yeah, and the 80s, I mean, that kind of experimentation of sort of performance art and ranty poets, and
Yeah,
it did create something quite special, really. So there you go. But look, this has been fantastic. I can see there's a countdown to the last 5 minutes. But thank you ever so much for giving me the time for this, and I'm so pleased
thank you.
this has come together.
Thank you
And
for being such a simpatico audience interviewer.
oh well, I'm always curious, and
Shall
then
we
it's
end with my loop tape?
Let's listen. Let's end on that loop. This is
Did you hear that?
It's a little bit fade. What is it? Did you say it's Duke Ellington?
Yes. But
I think
I put it on a loop. Which to me makes it more interesting.
Yes. Well, just turn it up a bit, and we all can just kind of have a moment.
Okay.
Yeah. It's got a nice vibe to it. Now, just to make sure I don't say how do you go? What name do you use for yourself? What name should I use, by the way?
What, for my human name?
Well, just for sort of introducing the show, I just wondered if you go by.
Well, the name my parents gave me,
Mm-hmm.
I sound a bit like a Scottish chieftain, is Anthony
Mm-hmm.
Roy Mackay Irvine. Irvine.
Anthony Irvine. Yes.
And you probably can see the connection with my painting name, AIM, Anthony Irvine Man.
Oh, yes.
Or Anthony Iceman.
AIM.
But of course, AIM is also very deep.
It is deep, actually. Yeah.
So I think it's quite a significant painting name.
It is.
But of course, I suppose people call me the Iceman, naturally.
Yes.
But of course, the trouble is, if you Google Iceman, you sort of come across so many strange Icemen, including there's an professional assassin called the Iceman.
Oh, yes. I suppose there was probably something from the Goodfellas, Martin Scorsese film.
And now I'm trying to really, I think, ironically, the AIM is really my new identity.
Yes. That's good. Anthony Iceman. Yes, I'm looking. There you go. It's all ringing a bell. Look, thank you ever so much. I'll let you go to bed. But yes, this is great. And if you want, I can always send you the link, and you can put it on your social media.
Oh, do yes. Is this actually going to go out?
It definitely is. God, this is
unadulterated.
Mostly, you wouldn't believe how many people love these kind of interviews because I'm often picking up. Oh God, it's got less than a minute because it's often picking up people that everyone goes, oh God, I remember that person, and they get very excited. Actually. So
thank you very much. I will send you a Polaroid copy.
Oh,
and a recent painting attachment.
God, I'll be so pleased. Yep. Okay, look, thank you ever so much.
What should I call it? Should I call it C86 block?
Call it, yes. That will capture the moment. It's going to end. Okay, take care.
Bye, David.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Love the eyes. See you later. Bye. And that, dear listener, is how you end a conversation with great smoothness, or not. Anyway, I love leaving those bits in for various reasons. Yes, stumbling over the conversation there. But anyway, look, a massive thank you to Anthony Irvine, the Iceman, for giving me the time for that interview. If you want to find his website, just do iceblocked.co.uk and you will see his artwork and everything as well. So, and if you want to contact me for some random reason, nice reason, don't do anything negative, frankly, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just do C86 Show. Also, all these have been archived, these interviews, and there's a lot of them. So you can find those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Do check them out. Anyway, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.